Well,
okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this Leeds Digital Festival talk on the final day of Leeds Digital Festival. So today we're going into the unknown. This is a conversation around a discovery phase, the wonders of discovery, some of the pitfalls that we can be avoiding. And we've got some of Analyst Digital's team here who run a discovery recently, as well as our wonderful colleagues at the University of Cambridge who were our client and went through the discovery with us. I thought it was really important to get them onto the call today as well, just so that we can get a rounded view of all the stakeholders involved in that, and hopefully leave you guys with some tips and some thoughts on how you can run a discovery yourselves. So on the call, I'll go for the Analyst Digital team here. So I'm Paul White, I'm our AI program lead, program manager across all of our AI programs here at ANSA. I've got Alex down here. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Our technical lead ANSA. So I've been working here for a few years.
Thank you. Jim.
hi everyone, Jim Phelps, business analyst.
And Christina.
Hello, I'm Christina Grant. I'm delivery lead at ANSA and was delivery on this discovery project.
Awesome. And on the call with us, we've got Professor Jean Abraham. Jean, will you give us an introduction?
Hi there, my name is Jean Abraham. I'm a cancer specialist in Cambridge and I direct the Breast Institute here.
Thanks. And Joe?
Hi, I'm Jo Worley and I'm the Breast Cancer Programme Manager for the Cambridge Cancer Centre.
Awesome. Okay, and so we have got Slido up and running for the presentation here. So please do join us on there. Ask us any questions. Give us any thoughts that you've had on discoveries that you've run in the past. We have a Q&A section right at the end that we'll go through those questions and thoughts and bring everyone in and have quite a sort of a social end to the session. And next slide, objectives, right? Yes, yeah, so setting the scene. The ANSA team here with Jean and Joe, they're going to go through how we approach discovery. How did we become experts in what we were looking at to get to the end of discovery and produce the outcomes that we needed. Go through how can you set up a discovery to succeed? How did we do that? What's best practice to follow, and what are those pitfalls that we all want to avoid, and how we avoided them as well. So in terms of, we thought the best way to start that was to set the scene, sort of how we have the scene set. So sort of inviting Jean and Joe here to go through what they work on and the areas that they're in charge of over in Cambridge, sort of set the problem, then we can talk about how we went about solving it. So Joe, I think you're going to lead on the ask.
Yep. So to set the scene a little bit, so over at Cambridge University and Addenbrooke's Hospital, we work on clinical research, so recruiting patients to clinical studies, collecting data and samples with them, but we also work with our university colleagues on novel and high impact research. However, to make clinical research really high impact, the ultimate aim is to really see that that research being implemented into standard NHS care and potentially healthcare beyond the UK as well. So the big problem is that clinical research can work on completely different timescales to clinical care. So we will collect a lot of information from patients as they go through their treatment. We may implement different treatments for them as part of clinical research, but a lot of the work that goes on in the lab, processing data, coming up with results, can happen several years after that patient has had their breast cancer diagnosis and had their treatment. In addition, data streams and expertise within the NHS and in the research environment can be quite siloed and work very separately. They might come together at certain time points, but there's no There's no real sort of proper way of learning from each other and getting insights from each other and how we can use each other's data. Finally, there's a lot of data generated, especially as we're now using a lot of digital information, digitizing pathology slides. We've got lots of genomic information as well from patients. We've got a lot of information, but we don't really know what's important and at what point that clinical data, that data is important. So a few years ago in the Cambridge Cancer Centre, we set up the Integrated Cancer Medicine programme. And the idea of that was really to bring together different kinds of data streams or multimodal data together. And with colleagues in the computer sciences department at the University of Cambridge, establish artificial intelligence and machine learning tools to see if we can get new insights from that data, and also potentially develop predictive and modeling tools. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. So in the research setting, we're collecting multimodal data through our clinical trials that are ongoing at the moment. These are mainly the personalised breast cancer programme and the partner trial. So I've got a couple of little schematics here. So in the personalised breast cancer programme, if a patient wants to take part in that study, we're doing whole genome sequencing for that patient and discussing the results and getting information back to the patient and the doctor within 12 weeks to see how that information can impact their clinical care. The partner trial is a more classic clinical trial where we're introducing a novel drug into that treatment and seeing if that improves the response for the patient for the treatment. So as well as those clinical trials, we're also collecting a lot of clinical data throughout that patient's care and up to 10 years follow-up as well. We are accessing their routine imaging scans throughout their treatment, their pathology from diagnosis and surgery, and also collecting sequential blood samples throughout their treatment. So this is where we're getting all our multimodal data from, whether it's the genome sequencing, information from the radiology examinations, from pathology, clinical data, and insights that we're getting from the samples we're collecting, such as circulating tumour DNA. So the computer sciences department have developed a proof of principle algorithms and data visualization platform using a lot of this data that's been collected retrospectively. But how can we then take the work we've done so far and make it usable in a clinically relevant time frame within the NHS? So that would be being able to feed the data in near real time and provide some insights to the patient and the clinician to impact their care. So we think this involves looking at our pipelines of how data flows, how we manage different data formats, how data is kept secure within the NHS firewalls and patients' identities are kept secure, how we can automate a lot of our processes, which are very manual at the moment. And although in the personalised breast cancer programme, we can process quite a lot of data to get genomic information back to patients within 12 weeks, it takes a lot of manpower to do that and is feasible in a research setting, but not practical to do within the NHS. We generate a lot of data that needs to be stored somewhere, needs to be managed effectively, and we need the processing power to manipulate the data. So as Cambridge academics, we're good at all the thinking and the ideas, but perhaps less of the practical solutions of how this can be brought into a usable package. So we asked Answer Digital to help develop a plan that would cover the infrastructure development and how this could be implemented within the hospital at the moment. We're in a lucky position where we're about to get a new cancer hospital built in Cambridge, hopefully, and also with other cancer types, other disease types, and maybe across other hospitals as well. So I'll hand back over to Jim.
Thanks, Joe. That's brilliant. Jean, anything you wanted to go on around there?
So, I mean, I think Joe covered it beautifully. I don't think there's really much to add other than what we are bad at is interoperability. We are really, really bad at getting all our different systems to talk to each other in a timely fashion. And I think Joe's explained that really well. And what we needed were some experts who have experience in connecting together NHS, hospitals, systems, units, and get them talking the same language and connected together, providing the right data in the right format in the right time frame. And I think that's what Answer Digital have certainly shown us that we can do. They've shown us the roadmap for that.
Awesome. So time to bring in the experts. Jim.
Yeah, well, I couldn't find the experts. They brought me in. So I want to talk a little bit about what we did once Cambridge got in touch with us. But firstly, I want to take a little bit of a step back and talk about what is discovery. It's a word we all know, but it has a bit of a technical meaning in terms of what we do as part of a project lifecycle. So discovery is a period at the start of a project. It's a collaborative period. It's very high intensity. It's where the people that are coming into it have very full knowledge of what's going on, and hence that's why it's called discovery. The key objective is really to understand the users, their needs, and what they're trying to achieve and why. It's about building relationships, trying to understand their objectives, and really think about if what they're trying to achieve is a good idea or not. It's about interrogating and breaking down assumptions. We want to understand the constraints that organization is facing, and these could be things like technical constraints. Are they limited by the technical stack that they've got at the minute, the things they can't get rid of? Does the solution have to be on-prem? Does it have to be in cloud? Are there certain aspects of their business process that they can't change or they're limited by? This is a particular concern in this kind of field where we're talking about clinical outcomes for patients, clinical best practice. There might also be regulatory constraints that are also that we need to understand. We want to identify opportunities and threats, and this is really looking at the wider space around the project. So what is there that's out there already that can be leveraged? What blockers are there? What risks are there? Another key point is during discovery, we're not starting to build the service. What we're trying to do is collect as much knowledge as possible and define the problem. So for Answer Digital, what does discovery mean? Well, it kind of means continual alignment on vision and goals, and how best can we deliver the vision for the customer. This really means a lot of time with the customer daily, time with the users that are going to be using it. And it's going to keep mentioning this word collaboration. Discovery is typically a thing where the company that's going to be doing the discovery comes in at a really high level, and they've got a really wide view, high altitude, and you need to start zooming in on the problem every day until you're right down at ground level by the end of the period. We need to share what we're learning internally and externally, and that's between the multidisciplinary team that are doing the discovery and with the customer as well. This is continual, it's daily. It means feeding back in both ways. We want to validate what we're learning with people. We want to refine what we have learned. And the last thing is we need to agree the problem we're trying to solve and how best to do it. So even if you're presented with a predefined solution when you're coming into discovery, really the goal is about interrogating it and reframing that as a problem to be solved. So what did we do over the 4 weeks? We had a basic 4-week plan, which is shown here, where there was a specific task that we wanted to get done every week. In week 1, it was all about initial alignment and elaboration. So the team internally, we went away and looked at all the materials that we had available to us at the time. This was talks that Jean and Joe had with our directors when we were trying to set up the working relationship between teams. And it was other presentation materials that they'd collected over the years. We planned a series of face-to-face workshops with the team at Cambridge, and we physically went down there to their hospital to go and meet them and talk to them. And this was a really, really intense week of talking to people in a very hot room in hospital in Cambridge, where we talked to each of the teams, which is digital pathology, radiomics, clinical, and genomics. And we're looking to find out what those people do in their daily jobs. We want to meet them, develop relationships with them, and understand what vision they're trying to achieve. We're trying to work out what each team does and why it's important, how it contributes to the whole. We want to document everything. I'm sure if any of you have been in any workshops in discovery or otherwise, you have a really interesting conversation going on, and lots of people frantically typing and trying to capture everything down. And you end up with some really, really messy series of post-it notes, either on a wall or in our case, on Miro boards. And so the job in week 2 was to try and refine what we'd furiously type down and make sense of it all. So we were looking at all the things that we captured, we're tidying it up. Once we tidied it up, we had follow-up calls with each of those teams separately. They're called the modality teams. We played back what we learned to them, and we found out what we got wrong and what we got right and what we needed to change. We also did a personas workshop, which is about trying to understand the different types of users that will be using the system once we get to the end of this. So we talked about an ideal of a clinician, a researcher, a patient, an administrator. We began writing documentation, and you can see on the right-hand side there how things changed over time, where we're drafting, refining, feeding back, getting new information, making it better and more accurate. By the end of week 2, we started having our internal workshops in a room in our own office here in Leeds, which is a very intense couple of days, which we all look back on with, I suppose, like a smile and a bit of relief that we're not in that position anymore, because it was really intense couple of days where we tried to understand this massive problem. The way that we looked at it was we thought we took it back to a position of, next slide, thanks. We took it back to a position of what does the patient want from this, and how do they move through this journey end-to-end, like a person with breast cancer. And we had this framework on the wall, and that really gave us a nice way of hanging off all the things that we had to deliver at every stage. And we stuck post-it notes all over this room. Every surface was covered. Paul referred to it as looking like a Jackson Pollock painting. And by the end of that, we had an agreed solution on the board here across 3 windows next to our car park, which we turned into this diagram here, which is our first phased delivery approach for this, where we had what the patient would go through and how we could have a phase 1, phase 2, and future phases where we're adding value at every stage. So week 3 was about taking that back to Cambridge and the other stakeholders and saying, this is what we think we're going to do, getting feedback on that and refining it again. So it's all about the collaboration and getting all the team aligned on what we're trying to do. This went through several iterations. And by the end of week 3, we had a plan of how we're going to deliver this. And you'll see that the first thing is very different to the last one. The first one's full of comments. It's not very mapped out. And by the end, everything was understood, and we were able to start writing our documentation in earnest. Now, along with the delivery approach, we're designing the architecture of the technical solution as well. And this went through a similar process where we had some scribblings on a whiteboard. And I think this went maybe through 12 different iterations before we arrived at the architecture. And again, we're continually playing that back to the customer, getting their feedback throughout the whole thing, the whole piece. Week 4 was a bit of a scramble to write everything down and write all of our documentation that we promised to deliver to Cambridge. There was a bit of refinement and estimation, and that was more to do with trying to turn that view that was on the previous page into a backlog of prioritized epics. If you can keep going, thank you. We finalized the architecture and yeah, just writing documentation. Here's some of the pictures of some of the things we produced. By the end of week 4, we had a discovery pack, which we were able to send out to all the different stakeholders. And this had a whole reams of different information on there, including prioritized backlog, project initiation documentation, solution architecture, process maps, wireframes, you name it, it was in there. So that's what we did on our discovery, and I'm going to hand over to Alex, who's going to talk to you about some of the key challenges that we thought we had along the way.
So yeah, we'll cover some of the challenges that we had. Well, first and foremost, we're talking about challenges straight away. I think hopefully not stealing or putting words in Joe and Jean's mouths, but we feel it was an incredible success, the discovery. We're very happy with the outcome and the process that we managed to run, but there were some key challenges, one of which was time. Now, we had 4 weeks to work this particular discovery period. Some of you who may well have run discovery periods before may not have had the luxury of 4 weeks. It may have only been maybe 1 or maybe a couple of days, depending on the ask. I think you'll, I guess, understand from how well Joe described the ask and the challenge that we were faced with, that 4 weeks was still quite a stretch for us to grasp everything and the nuances and complexities within there. So I guess we had a comparatively short time to understand what amounted to a complex environment. And fundamentally, we're engineers here at ANSA. We're not clinical experts, so we had a lot of steep learning curve to understand the nuances of the processes in the Cambridge hospitals and research team. We had sessions with domain experts that had to be very tightly focused. There was a risk there that we lost details in that, but we had to rein that in. And whether or not we had sufficient time internally to churn through that work, that was quite tight as well. Particularly the first workshop, I think we found was quite a challenge. We had a lot of people who had joined the room who were very keen and excited to hear about how AI could solve all of their working problems. But suffice to say, I don't think we were able to meet absolutely every stakeholder's sort of deliverable, but we focused in on a solution that would meet the majority's needs. So balancing stakeholder groups across sort of us as sort of the delivery team, we had stakeholders involved with hardware, as well as the clinical and research teams, sort of the different agendas there. That was quite a challenge for us. Also juggling time zones. We had some companions over on the west coast of the States who only get up at 4 p.m. our time. So that was a challenge to get those guys involved. And also Christina, who was doing a stellar job organising the cats in the room, making sure everyone was in the right place at the right time, which was a challenge for us as well. And then fundamentally condensing and distilling all of that knowledge that we'd gained through the first intense sort of workshop period, which was quite a lot, as you might imagine. We had a big challenge to, as Jim described, to condense all of that in some intense sessions where we debated about the delivery approach that we proposed to Cambridge subsequently. And that was an intense period of time. But over and all, we were really happy with that. But Joe and Jean, did you have any thoughts on the challenges from Cambridge perspective?
Yeah, so some of these are mine. So perhaps if I go through them, Jean, you can chip in. But I think from my perspective, we'd never done this before. So I think it was new. We had no idea really what was going to happen or exactly what was involved. But I think Leeds Digital supported us very, very kindly all the way through it. As Alex said, I think managing expectations a little bit. I think there was some disappointment if certain teams' problems weren't really addressed in the first couple of phases of the delivery. And not everything we do, sadly, can be automated, unfortunately, but never mind. We did find the personas workshop a bit of a struggle, really trying to hone in on individual personas, because so many of us have different roles and functions across the NHS and the university. And And yeah, and I think also we were bringing lots of people together from the clinical side to the research, from the research side of the university. And I think we all have slightly different mindsets and views on how things need to be done and everything. So there was like an element of Answers Digital need to find that kind of compromise and middle ground and meeting everybody's expectations. I personally couldn't get Slack to work. I think that might be an NHS firewall problem. I don't know. And then I think we had a lot of excitement and momentum about wanting to immediately kick off and start delivering the project after it had finished. But unfortunately, the problem of getting such a big project funded is in the way. So it's perhaps not going to be quite as fast and continuous as we'd hoped for. But yeah, I don't think Answers Digital could have really solved that problem for us unless they had a very rich benefactor somewhere.
I think the other thing to say is that we actually learned a lot about each other within our own team, because it's not often that you take the time to sit down and actually hear the detail of the work that someone else does in an area that you don't work in. And so as a director of the unit, it was really helpful for me to just hear each step of the pathway and really understand the efforts that everybody puts in to just get each part of that their deliverable delivered on time in the right place. And I think we've learnt a lot about valuing each other's work and valuing and respecting each other actually as well by doing this. So I think it's not just a discovery for Answers Digital, actually, it's a discovery for us as well. So it's very good.
I think that's on the next slide, actually, if you wanted to move to the...
That was a brilliant soundbite there, Jean. That's what we should have thought.
I'll charge you for it later. We're a bit cash strapped.
Yes. So we went through some successes as well. So as well as what Jean just said, it did bring a lot of us very keen and excited people wanting to sort of see the research go to the next step together. I think, seeing some of our processes mapped out was quite eye-opening, and some of them are like ridiculously complicated. So it would be great to see them streamlined a bit. I was really impressed with really how Answers Digital asked the questions and really grilled us and got to the nub of what the problems were, where the key sticking points were. It was really impressive how they actually understood sort of all the technical information from a range of different subjects. I really enjoyed the first week of meetings. It was great that they were face to face. It really helped build the relationships with the Answers Digital team. And I don't think we could have maintained that level of intensity throughout the 4-week period, but getting that first week done was great. And I think the rest of the team were really open for being contacted and asked questions and everything for the rest of the period. And I think just having that output that we've got now, we've got a package of really useful detailed information, costed projects, phased. So it feels like something that's deliverable rather than a big problem where we don't really know where to start, really. or it seemed like a big mountain to climb, but I think we've got some steps now that are much more deliverable.
So from an answer perspective, I suppose jumping in there, we had a really positive customer relationship as part of this discovery period, which I'm hoping is coming across. We had a receptive and excited client who was very happy to take our steer in terms of how to discuss their requirements, how to break down the complexities of their requirements. And yes, we had those first workshops in person. We really believe in building good relationships with our clients. And as part of any discovery period, we recommend, where possible, starting in person. We feel that you can just build a better relationship with those in the room. Yes, of course, as we are now, we're able to be hybrid and virtual. And indeed, in the latter parts of the discovery process, we were virtual. Sustaining the intensity of the first week of workshops, not only for us on sort of a intensity perspective, but also from the availability of the clinicians who so generously donated their time to the first week's workshops would probably not be sustainable. So we switched back to a virtual mode where we could sort of keep on keeping in touch with the clinicians and updating them on our sort of thoughts and our current thinking, and that was really key for us. In terms of getting the right people in the room, Jean and Joe were really gracious in sort of coordinating with Christina to make sure that the relevant domain experts for each of the modalities, be that sort of pathology, radiology, genomics, or just clinical, I'd say just clinical, doing them a disservice. Yeah, the right people in the right room for each workshop. And that was really key to us understanding each of those 4 modalities that we need to speak to. In terms of how we move forward and actually sort of progress through the discovery, for us, we made a decision to have constant playbacks from an early stage. So right from the first workshops, we were feeding back our understanding, which was often corrected at the end of the workshop, just to make sure that we thoroughly understood what had been conveyed to us. And then we'd play back at the end of each week to say, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we've understood to date, and this is what we're thinking. And fundamentally, it was all about flexibility for us. I think it was really important to not go in with any sort of dispositions about ideas on what the solution will end up looking like at week 1. It's very important for us to keep iterating on that and developing that idea as we go along, not being too precious to throw something out. And that's why we ended up with 10 versions of the solution architecture by the time we've done discovery, because we've just sort of gone around the houses a bit in terms of what was and wasn't suitable for the client, and based on feedback from Cambridge as well. So hand over to Christina.
Fantastic, thanks, Alex. So just as a way to kind of sum up this presentation, before we move into a time of questions, I'm just going to share from a kind of project manager's perspective some thoughts. So as you've seen in the presentation so far, discovery is really hard, and if you've done one before, you'll know this. And we've seen today that there's really short time frames. The ask is often much bigger than maybe it first seems, or that seems achievable in the short time frames. You're building up new relationships with new stakeholders, new team members in a completely new field that often you've never worked in before. And there's just a whole ton of uncertainty. That's why we called the talk Into the Unknown. It's a kind of a journey into a misty sort of future that you're trying to kind of discover and make clearer as you go. So because the timeframes are so short, one of the key things that I guess will primarily to the delivery lead or whoever's kind of facilitating it is to have a really strong start. So here's some thoughts from me about how you set yourself up to not waste any time at the beginning and to really go in all guns blazing. So you'd probably expect me to say as a PM to plan and replan. So plan out your however long it is. We had 4 weeks. Break that into phases, have objectives for each week, maybe even each day, because there's not time for any day to be wasted. So work backwards from the end, know exactly where you need to get to by the end of the 4 weeks, and then break that up into workable sections. I would recommend that you really understand your playback and kind of presentation requirements from the off. So don't be surprised in week 3 when there's requirements to present to certain stakeholders. Make arrangements for those right from the off. So it's all about breaking it down into manageable chunks. So that's the plan, but also the deliverables. So if you just go on to the next slide, we had a plan for the 4 weeks. This was our really high level plan. There were many different versions, but also a tracker for all of the deliverables, know exactly who is owning each of these elements, who's going to contribute to them, who's reviewing them, and break it down and make sure everyone knows what they're on the hook for right from the start. And then the next thing is make sure that you've got the right people and the right skills in your team. Ideally, everyone would be full-time from day one. Sometimes that's not possible with other commitments, but really to start strong, you need to have that right team together. And so if you're responsible for kind of the resourcing of discoveries, think not only about the people and the job roles and how many VAs you might need or how many technical architects, but also the right characteristics and kind of approaches to work. It's, as we've seen, a really intense period, and actually that doesn't suit everybody. So have a think about the characteristics within your team and who's going to have that right mindset and the resilience to really see it through. And next one we've got, so key stakeholders, as we've seen, the relationships that we've been building with the client and with other stakeholders have been so important. So understanding those right from the off, what are the networks and what are the different relationships and the dynamics between those stakeholders. Don't try and avoid any surprises in the middle of your discovery, because that if you can avoid those early on, it's better. Next one is that there's going to be a whole ton of assimilation of knowledge and the collation and learning that Jim and Alex have talked about. So as a PM, try and facilitate that as much as possible, create space for people to research and to work on their own, but also to come back together and communicate with each other. And I just echo Alex's point about co-location being really key for that. It was so important for us to be able to gather in person in our Leeds office, but also to have time at home, beavering away, writing stuff down. And then the next one, thank you. And I think through all the ups and downs of the kind of discovery and this journey that we go on together, the key thing to keep us all together is having that common goal. So understanding that ask that Joe set out so clearly at the start was really important, so that when we kind of felt like we were going off on tangents or we weren't making progress, we knew exactly why we were doing this, what benefit this is going to bring to kind of wider users, and how it's going to make the world a better place. And that was really important. And then I think this final one is that as a PM, I'm going to big up trackers. So I would recommend having trackers for absolutely anything. You don't have time to be collating knowledge from different places. Make it as easy as possible. Even have a tracker of trackers if you want to. So here's just one example of a tracker that we use for the deliverables about who'd reviewed what, when stuff was going to be ready, and just try and simplify as much of this complexity into spreadsheets and trackers that can be your friends and be your companions for the month or however long your discovery is. So just before I hand over to Paul, hopefully you've kind of got a sense, if you've not been on a discovery project before, it's a really high intensity, high pressure thing. It's definitely not sustainable in kind of day-to-day work for a long period of time. And like any journey or climbing a mountain, there's challenges, but it's also really rewarding. And it's a really exciting time. There's loads of opportunities. And it's so important for laying the groundwork for a successful delivery phase, whether that's going to happen straight after discovery or be a few months hence. So that's why discovery is so important, because it lays the groundwork for things to go successfully in the future. So hopefully this talk has been helpful for you. Maybe it's reminded you of things from previous discoveries you've been on, or maybe raised new questions for you about the kind of challenges you might face in the future. So Paul, I'll hand over to you to see if you had any questions from the floor.
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you to all our speakers there, Jean, Joe, Nicole, Alex, Christina and Jim. That was really brilliant. Thank you for that. And questions have been flying in. So I guess I'll just direct these to the relevant people, I think. Top of the list at the moment is, did you use an agile delivery approach or more waterfall? So Jim, Alex, I think, you want to come in on that?
Shuffling. This was definitely an agile approach, and it needed to be an agile approach from the get-go. We did have some, I suppose, waterfall-y type goals at the start, but the thing with discovery is the ice is always shifting underneath your feet. You need to be able to react to changes very quickly, and so if you have an idea at the start, you can't what's the word? You can't move towards that goal if it becomes wrong during. I'm trying to think of the word pig-headedly. You can't just keep moving towards it. if it's not appropriate. And things that you learn over discovery can mean that the thing that you planned at the beginning is completely inappropriate. And so it has to be an agile approach. Our team was a multidisciplinary team that we had here. We had some agile ceremonies that we adhered to. So we had a daily stand-up, for example. We had kickoff. I believe we somehow found time to do a retro at the end of every week to try and improve our ways of working. I do think they helped. They helped us organize every day about who was doing what, who was behind. Christina's trackers were really helpful with that, and they were being updated every day, jumped around, edited. So definitely it was an agile approach, not a waterfall one. I think I'd struggle to see how discovery would work with a waterfall approach, where typically you are much less able to change midstream. So yeah, for us it's agile.
I think, yeah, waterfall would definitely force you down an almost cookie cutter approach to your solution that you're offering there, which just wouldn't be appropriate for 90%.
Awesome. I think there's a couple of questions that I think we can sort of group as well. So one is, how did we find completing all of this work in 4 weeks? Do you have the commitment of all the relevant stakeholders for that time period? And I think the maybe linked question being, how much prep work did we do ahead of discovery to establish what deliverables we had? And I guess maybe to kick that off, coming on the screen, yeah, all bouncing, slide in. Right, so I think, yeah, the very first thing that we did, I think, Christina, was try and get that commitment of the relevant stakeholders. So we reached out to Gene and Joe very early on to book meetings in weeks and weeks in advance. Not every discovery for people on this call is going to be in the NHS or in healthcare, but certainly in the NHS, if you're wanting to get times from clinicians, you need to be getting in a few weeks in advance to work around their rota. So we've learned from that before. I found that very important. Did you have anything else you wanted to do on?
Yeah, I think it was also a case of being flexible to different demands kind of during the 4 weeks. So sometimes we didn't quite know exactly when we were going to need people's time, but building those positive relationships that then enabled us, when the time came, to say, actually, would you mind shuffling things, or do we need to shuffle our diaries to make it all work? So I think that flexibility and yeah, positive relationships is what helped us there as well. And also, I guess, Answers run previous discoveries in the past, so we've had lessons learned from other discoveries, even in the artificial intelligence space. We knew we had deliverables from those that we could kind of learn from and build on. So that was really great from a knowledge perspective, but also just a kind of collateral. We got sort of templates for plans and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly some answer we've been focusing on quite a lot in terms of, as we do these discoveries, learning from them and building out that playbook and collateral that you can bring to the next discovery, so you're not doing everything from scratch. I think it's certainly a big help. Other questions that we had, interesting one here, so how did we approach selling the worth of discovery to a business and the time it takes when people may have already assumed a solution? And Alex, what you said earlier, I thought was really key here, in terms of, you were saying your technical architecture approach is to try and go in pretty open-minded and not force down a certain way of thinking. And so I think if we approached a discovery where the client thought they needed a solution, I don't think we'd have changed anything that we did, because I think parts of weeks 1, 2, and 3 is to get that all written out and very visible. And then, like Gene and Joe were saying, they learn a tremendous amount from just seeing that written down. And I think if the client's got the right solution from day one, then that's proven out. Otherwise,
it is. I guess that it is our absolute responsibility as a consultancy to validate whatever sort of initial thinking that's been done, maybe by ourselves, or maybe by the client, or maybe by a third party who may have been involved previously in a particular project. If there is something on the table to work with, we'd absolutely take that and iterate on it and sort of, kick its tires a little bit, just to verify whether or not that would be appropriate to take forward, or we maybe start again. Again, we have to be flexible in discovery.
Yeah, I think as well, if you're thinking about doing your own discovery with a client that you've got, and how do you sell the worth of your discovery to that client? One of the things that businesses are very good at doing is solving a problem very well, but perhaps solving the wrong problem. And the purpose of discovery is really to understand the problem that needs to be solved. And really, when you think about it, it's kind of a low risk way of doing it. You could have a company that just decides we're going to fix problem X, we're going to race ahead and do it. But actually, it should have been fixing problem Y. And fixing problem X is a big, long journey. Perhaps it's a, maybe a year's worth of development. And really taking a month to start up to find out that you shouldn't be solving problem X is actually the real, one of the real good ways of selling discovery to a client that you've got. If the client decides that they don't want to go through with solving problem Y, they don't have to, and they spend relatively little money compared to going ahead and solving the wrong problem. Also, if they don't want to solve it right away, they can park the findings of discovery and work on it later. So I think that's one of the ways that you can really sell the worth of discovery if you've got a client.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Joe. And I think last question. Anonymous appreciates that we recognise the high intensity working after discovering that maybe that condensed period isn't a sustainable thing that you continue doing over time. Their question is, how much wraparound time is there to prep for and recover from this? I think the recovery started, Jean, pretty quickly with a stiff drink in Cambridge after we've completed it. But yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yes, discoveries are intense. I think it's fair to say. We were relieved towards the end where we'd actually come together with a sort of cohesive proposal. At one point in the middle, I probably thought that nothing was cohesive, but we got to the point where we were really happy with that. In terms of handling that, I think, I don't know, it depends on the particular business you're in, but as Answer, we don't necessarily throw the same people into discovery week in, week out. I think that would be unsustainable for individuals to actually understand the information that's being conveyed to them, produce a proposal straight into the next one. I know certain companies that I heard of who do have discovery teams that specialize in that. But I think it's also nice as, certainly speaking personally as an engineer, to actually go through to delivery at some point and actually produce the things that you are talking about. So yes, I don't think it'd be personally sustainable to do discoveries all day, every day. Yeah. But they are very valuable exercises and you learn a lot from them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd just add that we were kind of fortunate that the end of our discovery coincided with the Platinum Jubilee long bank holiday weekend. So if you can align with something like that, that's great. I happen to also have a week's holiday as well. But I think the other thing to recognise is that different people were in a high intensity, high stress period at different times. So within our internal team, there were days when one person was stressed and others could kind of help out and cover. And then sometimes from day to day or week to week, that would shift. And so it's not necessarily that everyone's really maxed out at the same time. So recognizing how you can support each other was really important. And yeah, well-timed holidays.
Yeah, and I think at the start, it's that, again, that prep work. So if you've done discoveries in the past, I think, or the next discovery you do, producing that collateral in a way that it can be reused. And also this month-long discovery preceded months of discussions at a high level just to get to the point where we're going to start discovery. So we had a good idea of what we were walking into, and again, the deliverables were ones that we were familiar with, that we produced in the past. So I think all that de-risking that you can do prior to the month starting is all well and good. I think that's it for questions. I mean, Jean and Joe, again, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else that you've got, any last thoughts?
Go on, Joe, you first.
I just want to concur with Christina's love of a tracker, because we use them a lot in clinical research as well. So yeah, but I think it was a really interesting process to observe, and yeah, we're really looking forward to continue working with Answer Digital.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I'd like to thank the Answer Digital team for their patience with me in particular. I think sometimes working with clinicians is tricky because they're just juggling too many things, and so you know, having the flexibility and kindness to bear with that was really obvious from my perspective, that, and it really helped this project to work well, because you don't need the team lead at every project, every meeting, but you might need them at specific points. And it's great when you've built a relationship where someone can say to you, well, actually, we don't need you for that, and or actually, we very much do need you for that. And again, I think like all projects in any walk of life, it's just about relationship building. If you get the relationships right, pretty much everything else flows. So I'd like to congratulate Leeds Digital on that.
Thanks, Dean. And yeah, again, it was a really pleasurable discovery. I think we all, as busy that moment was, it was a thrilling ride.
Yeah, we kept mentioning at the last question there the intensity of the project, and it definitely was intense. But I think it's really important to say that it was really enjoyable as well. When you're in that kind of white heat of discovery, you're learning so much every day. I came into the project knowing very little about multimodal AI, and I'm sure I know very little about multimodal AI right now, but I know so much more than I did at the start of it. And it's such an interesting thing to learn about, and every discovery really takes you into the brains of the people that you're working with and how they tick, and it's a great experience. It's intense but wonderful.
And on that note, yeah, I think intense and wonderful. That's our take of a discovery. Very keen to go over on some Friday afternoon back. So thank you everyone for joining the call. Thank you for signing up. Jean and Joe, you've been amazing. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, thanks everyone. Catch you later.
Thanks all.